The monitors flatlined with a shrill cry that echoed through the sterile hospital room, and Dr. Martinez shook his head with the finality of a judge's gavel. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty room, "but she's gone." But Elena Vasquez wasn't. Gone, not yet. Trapped in the shadowland between life and death, she floated in darkness, hearing fragments of conversations like distant radio static. "Cancer," they said. "Stage 4. 23 years old. Such a shame." The words drifted around her like autumn leaves. Cold and brittle. Then came the voice she'd been waiting for, without knowing it, rough as weathered leather, warm as whiskey by a winter fire. "Ma'am, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm Jake Morrison. I was driven by when I saw the ambulance, and something told me to follow." Elena tried to speak, to move, to signal that she was still here, still fighting, but her body had become a prison of tubes and wires. The doctors had given up. Her family had said their goodbyes. Even the nurses spoke in hushed tones about making arrangements. "They say you're from Texas," Jake continued, his voice cutting through the medical machinery's symphony. "Well, I reckon that makes you tougher than most. Texas girls don't quit easy." Through the haze of medication and pain, Elena felt something shift. A warmth that had nothing to do with the heated blankets the nurses tucked around her. Jake's presence filled the room like sunlight streaming through storm clouds. "I know we ain't met proper," he said, and she heard the scrape of a chair being pulled closer to her bed. "But I lost my sister to this same devil 3 years back. Sat in a room just like this one, watching her fight. She was stronger than 10 men, but sometimes strong ain't enough without someone believing in you." Elena's heart monitor gave a tiny blip, the first sign of life she'd shown in hours. The night nurse, Maria, paused in the doorway. She'd been about to ask the strange cowboy to leave, but something in his voice made her step back into the shadows. "You know what my sister told me before she passed?" Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said the secret to surviving ain't in the medicine or the machines. It's in finding something worth living for. Someone who sees you not as you are, but as you could be." Elena felt tears she couldn't shed burning behind her closed eyelids. She'd been alone for so long. Her parents lost to a car accident when she was 18. No siblings, no close friends to speak of. The cancer had taken her job, her apartment, her future. She'd come to this hospital to die, not to live. "I'm gonna tell you something that might sound crazy," Jake said, and she heard the rustle of fabric, the soft thud of something being set down. "I'm putting my hat on your head. It's my granddaddy's hat. Been in my family for 60 years. It's seen drought and flood, heartbreak and joy, and it's never sat on the head of a quitter." The weight of the hat settled on her head like a crown, and Jake's smile, she couldn't see it, but she felt it trapped around her like a promise. "Now, you fight, Elena Vasquez. You fight like the Texas girl you are." The hat felt like a lifeline in an ocean of darkness. Elena's first conscious thought wasn't of pain or fear, it was of the gentle weight pressing against her skull, carrying with it the scent of leather and hope. When she finally opened her eyes 3 days later, Jake was still there, slouched in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, straightening up with a grin that lit up his entire face. "Look who decided to rejoin the land of the living." Elena tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. Jake was already reaching for the water pitcher, ice cubes clinking against the plastic as he poured. "Easy now," he murmured, helping her take tiny sips. "You've been out for a while. Had us all worried." "How long?" she managed to croak. 5 days since I put my hat on your head. 3 days since you stopped trying to leave us." His eyes, the color of sage in morning light, studied her face. "Dr. Martinez calls it a miracle. I call it stubbornness." Elena's hand drifted to her head, fingers finding the worn felt of the cowboy hat. "Your grandfathers, great-grandfathers, actually, cattle rancher from Amarillo, wore that hat through the Dust Bowl, the Depression, 2 wars, and 40 years of marriage to the most ornery woman in Texas." Jake's smile softened. She was also the most beautiful, or so he always said. The door burst open, and Dr. Martinez rushed in, his face a mixture of disbelief and scientific curiosity. "Elena, you're awake. This is unprecedented. Your white blood cell count has stabilized, and the inflammation markers are dropping. I've never seen anything like it." Elena looked past the doctor to Jake, who was trying to hide his smile behind his coffee cup. "It's the hat," she said simply. "Doctor." Martinez frowned. "I'm sorry." "Nothing, Doc," Jake interjected. "Just a little Texas superstition." After the doctor left with promises of more tests and cautious optimism, Alina turned to Jake. You don't even know me. Why are you here? Jake set down his coffee and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. My sister Sarah used to say that sometimes the universe puts people in your path for a reason. Maybe it's to teach you something. Maybe it's to heal something broken. Or maybe it's just because somebody needs to care, and you're the one who's supposed to do the caring. And you think I'm your someone. I think you're somebody who deserves to be fought for, he said quietly. And I think you've been fighting alone for too long. Alina felt something crack open in her chest, not pain, but the opposite. A space where hope could grow. Tell me about your ranch. Jake's face lit up. It's nothing fancy. 150 acres of the prettiest land God ever made, about 2 hours south of here. Got a creek that runs year-round, and in the spring, the wildflowers stretch from here to Sunday. I run a small herd of cattle, got a few horses, a barn cat named Whiskers, who thinks he owns the place. It sounds peaceful. It is quiet enough to hear yourself think, but not so quiet you feel alone. There's something about being connected to the land that makes you feel, I don't know, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. Alina closed her eyes, trying to imagine wide open spaces and endless sky. For 3 years, her world had shrunk to the size of hospital rooms and treatment centers. The thought of horizon lines and sunsets made her chest tight with longing. When I get out of here, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice, will you show me? Jake's smile was answer enough. Darling, you just gave me the best reason to pray for your recovery. 2 weeks later, Alina walked out of the hospital wearing Jake's hat and a yellow sundress he'd brought her. The color of hope, he'd said. The doctors remained baffled by her recovery, speaking in hushed tones about remission and unexplained medical phenomena. Alina preferred Jake's explanation. Sometimes the heart knows how to heal what the mind can't understand. The drive to Jake's ranch took them through rolling hills dotted with wildflowers and cattle. Alina pressed her face to the passenger window, drinking in the sight of endless sky and distant mountains. She'd forgotten how big the world could be. There she is, Jake said, pointing to a modest ranch house nestled in a valley. The old Morrison place. Been in my family for 4 generations. The house was painted white with blue shutters, surrounded by a wraparound porch that begged for lazy afternoons and sweet tea. A golden retriever bounded toward their truck, tail wagging with the enthusiasm of a parade flag. That's Honey, Jake said, climbing out to greet the dog. She's the official welcoming committee. Alina stepped out slowly, still weak but determined. The air smelled of grass and wildflowers, with an underlying hint of horses and leather that she was beginning to associate with Jake himself. When Honey approached, Alina knelt down, laughing as the dog covered her face with kisses. She likes you, Jake observed. That's a good sign. Honey's usually pretty particular about people. Animals can sense things, Alina said, scratching behind Honey's ears. My grandmother used to say they know who has a good heart. Jake's eyes lingered on her face. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She would have liked you. Alina stood, brushing dog hair from her dress. She always said the best men were the ones who weren't afraid to be gentle. That evening, they sat on the porch swing, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Alina wore Jake's hat pushed back on her head, and he'd given her one of his flannel shirts to ward off the evening chill. She looked small in it, fragile, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there in the hospital, a spark of life that grew brighter each day. I used to paint, she said suddenly. Before I got sick, I was actually pretty good at it. What kind of painting? Landscapes mostly. I loved capturing the way light changes throughout the day. The way a field looks different at dawn than it does at sunset. She gestured toward the horizon. I could paint this view 100 times and never get tired of it. Jake was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to the porch railing. I've got a confession to make. I've been fixing up the old cabin by the creek. It's got big windows facing west. Perfect light for an artist. I was hoping you might want to stay. Alina's heart did a little skip. Stay, not forever, he said quickly, turning back to her. I mean, not unless you want to. But you're still recovering. And this place, it's got a way of healing people. Plus, I make a mean chicken and dumplings. Alina laughed, the sound carrying across the valley like music. Is that your way of asking me to move in with you, Jake Morrison? I reckon it is. He sat back down, beside her, his hands fidgeting with the brim of his spare hat. I know it's crazy. We barely know each other. But sometimes crazy is just another word for faith. Alina reached over and took his hand. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. As the stars began to appear, Jake squeezed her hand. Alina. Yes. Thank you. For what? For giving me a reason to believe in miracles again. Spring arrived early that year, painting the ranch in shades of green and gold that made Elena's artist heart sing. She'd been living in the restored cabin for 2 months, and each morning brought new strength, new hope, new reasons to be grateful for the second chance she'd been given. The cabin was perfected. Cozy space with wide windows that caught the morning light, and a small studio where she'd set up her easel. Jake had surprised her with art supplies, claiming he'd asked around about what a painter might need. Alina suspected he'd spent hours researching, and the thoughtfulness of it made her chest tight with emotion. You're up early, Jake said, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. He'd taken to checking on her every morning, a habit that had evolved from concern to something sweeter. Couldn't sleep. The light was too perfect. Alina gestured to the canvas she'd been working on, a view of the creek with the old oak tree that had become her favorite spot. I'm trying to capture the way the water looks when the sun hits it. Jake set down her coffee and moved to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. It's beautiful, Alina. You've got a real gift. My grandmother used to say that art was just another way of praying. A way of saying thank you for all the beauty in the world. Alina set down her brush and turned to face him. I've got a lot to be thankful for these days. The space between them seemed to shrink, and Alina found herself studying the lines around Jake's eyes. The way his hair curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. He was handsome in a weathered, honest way that made her feel safe and breathless all at once. Alina, he said softly, I need to tell you something. What? I'm fallen in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and true. Alina felt her heart skip, then settle into a rhythm that felt like coming home. Jake, ... I know it's complicated, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. I know you're still recovering, still figuring out what comes next. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just about friendship or charity or whatever I told myself in the beginning. You've become ... everything to me. Alina reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Do you know what I was thinking about this morning, when I was painting? What I was thinking about how this place has taught me the difference between surviving and living. In the hospital, I was just trying to make it through each day. But here, with you, I'm actually living. I'm planning for tomorrow, and next week, and next month. I'm dreaming again. Jake's hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. And what do you dream about? I dream about staying here forever. About painting every sunrise and sunset. About learning to ride the horses. About helping you with the ranch. I dream about growing old with you on that porch swing. Telling stories to grandchildren who think we're crazy for believing in magic hats and love at first sight. Alina, Jake whispered. And then he was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of promises. She tasted like coffee and hope. And he wondered how he'd lived 32 years without knowing that this was what he'd been waiting for. When they broke apart, Alina was smiling. I love you too, Jake Morrison. I love you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. I love you for believing in me when I'd given up believing in everything. So what happens now? Jake asked, his forehead resting against hers. Now we live, Alina said simply. We live and love and make every day count. Outside, the sun climbed higher, painting the valley in gold. And Alina knew that this was what healing looked like. Not just the absence of sickness, but the presence of joy, the promise of tomorrow, the certainty of love. Summer brought with it a heat that shimmered off the prairie like liquid gold, and Alina had never felt more alive. Her art had evolved with her healing, becoming bolder, more vibrant. She'd sold 3 paintings to a gallery in town, and the local newspaper had written a feature about the miracle artist who'd beaten cancer with the help of faith and love. But happiness, Alina was learning, was a fragile thing. The call came. On a Tuesday morning in July, Alina was in her studio, working on a commissioned piece, when she heard Jake's phone ring from the main house. His voice carried across the yard, at first casual, then sharp with concern. Alina, he called, and something in his tone made her set down her brush immediately. She found him standing in the kitchen, his face pale, the phone still clutched in his hand. What is it? That was Dr. Martinez. He wants to see you. Today. Elena's blood turned to ice. Did he say why? No, just that some of your test results came back, and he needs to discuss them with you in person. They drove to the hospital, in silence. Elena's hand gripping Jake's so tightly, she was surprised she didn't break his fingers. The familiar smell of disinfectant and fear hit her as soon as they walked through the doors, and she had to fight the urge to run. Dr. Martinez was waiting in his office, his expression carefully neutral. Elena, thank you for coming in so quickly. Please, sit down. Just tell me, Elena said, remaining standing. Is it back? The doctor sighed. I'm afraid so. The latest scans showed new growth in your lymph nodes. The cancer appears to be more aggressive than we initially thought. Elena felt Jake's hand on her back, steadying her. What are the options? We'll need to start treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, radiation, possibly surgery. Even then, Dr. Martinez spread his hands. I won't lie to you, Elena. The prognosis isn't good. 6 months, maybe a year with aggressive treatment. The words hit Elena like physical blows. 6 months, a year. She'd had 3 months of happiness, 3 months of believing in forever. And now that forever was being measured in seasons. I need some air, she whispered, and fled from the office. Jake found her in the hospital chapel, sitting in the back pew with her head in her hands. The afternoon sun streamed through stained glass windows, painting rainbows on the floor, but Elena couldn't see beauty in anything anymore. Elena, Jake said, sliding into the pew beside her. Talk to me. I can't do it again, she said, her voice breaking. I can't go through the treatments, the sickness, the slow dying. I won't put you through that. Hey, Jake turned her face toward him. Look at me. We're gonna fight this thing together. No. Elena pulled away. You don't understand. I've been living on borrowed time, and now the bills come due. I won't drag you down with me. That's not your choice to make, Jake said firmly. I love you, Elena, all of you. The strong parts and the scared parts, the healthy parts and the sick parts. You think I'm gonna walk away now? You should, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. You should find someone who can give you the life you deserve. Someone who can grow old with you, have your children, be your partner for more than a few months. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and adjusted the hat on her head, his grandfather's hat that had never left her side. You remember what I told you about this hat? It's seen drought and flood, heartbreak and joy. That's right. And you know what else it's seen? It's seen my great-grandfather sit by my great-grandmother's bedside for 3 years while she battled tuberculosis. It's seen him hold her hand through every treatment, every setback, every moment of fear. She lived, Elena. She lived because he never gave up on her. Elena closed her eyes. Jake, I'm not saying it's gonna be easy. I'm not saying we're guaranteed a happy ending. But I am saying that love isn't just about the good times. It's about showing up when things get hard. It's about fighting for each other when the world tells you to quit. What if I don't make it? Then we'll make every day count. We'll love each other so hard that even if we only get 6 months, it'll be the best 6 months of our lives. Jake took her hands. But Elena, I believe in miracles. I believe in the power of love to heal what medicine can't touch. And I believe in you. Elena looked at him through her tears, this man who'd given her his hat and his heart, who'd shown her what it meant to be loved unconditionally. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll fight. The next 4 months were a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and quiet moments that felt precious beyond measure. Elena's hair fell out again, and her body weakened, but her spirit remained strong. Jake never left her side, turning the passenger seat of his truck into a mobile command center, complete with pillows, blankets, and a cooler full of her favorite foods. You're gonna make yourself sick, taking care of me like this, Elena said, one morning as Jake helped her into the truck for another chemotherapy session. Well, then you'll just have to take care of me, he replied, settling the hat more securely on her head. It had become a ritual. The hat went everywhere with her, a tangible reminder of hope and love. The treatment was brutal this time. Body, already weakened by the previous battle, seemed to rebel against the medicine designed to save her. She spent days in bed, too weak to paint, too sick to eat, surviving on Jake's quiet presence and the view of the creek from her cabin window. Not giving up, she told him one evening as he sat beside her bed, reading aloud from a book of poetry. I want you to know that, even when it looks like I'm giving up, I'm not. I know, Jake said simply. And I'm not giving up either. It was during her darkest week that Maria, the night nurse from the hospital, came to visit. Elena was sleeping when she arrived, so Maria and Jake sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. I've been a nurse for 20 years, Maria said, and I've never seen anything like what happened with Elena, the way she came back from the brink. It defied everything I know about medicine. Love's a powerful thing, Jake said. It is, but, Jake, I need you to know this time might be different. Her body's been through so much. Sometimes the heart wants to fight, but the flesh just can't keep up. Jake was quiet for a long moment. You think she's dying? I think she's very sick. And I think you both need to be prepared for the possibility that love might not be enough this time. That night, Alina woke to find Jake sitting in the chair beside her bed, his head in his hands. Jake, what's wrong? He looked up, and she saw tears on his cheeks. I'm scared, Alina. I'm scared of losing you, and I'm scared of not being strong enough to help you through this. Alina struggled to sit up, and Jake immediately moved to help her. Come here, she said, patting the bed beside her. When he settled next to her, she took his hand. Do you remember what you told me about your great-grandparents? That they fought together. That's right. They fought together. Not just him fighting for her, but both of them fighting for each other. For their love. For their future. For every day they could have. Alina squeezed his hand. I need you to fight with me, Jake. Not for me, but with me. Can you do that? Jake nodded, bringing her hand to his lips. Till the end, darling. Whatever that looks like. Alina smiled, the expression lighting up her thin face. Then let's make sure it's an ending worth fighting for. The next morning, Alina surprised everyone by getting out of bed and walking to her easel. Her hands shook as she picked up her brush, but her eyes were clear and determined. What are you painting? Jake asked, settling into the chair he'd moved permanently into her studio. Our story, Alina said, mixing colors on her palette. I want to capture this moment, this feeling. The way love looks when it's tested by fire and comes out stronger. As she painted, Jake watched her face transform. The sickness fell away, replaced by the fierce concentration of an artist at work. And in that moment, he understood something fundamental about Alina. She wasn't just fighting to live, she was fighting to create, to leave something beautiful behind. To prove that love could transform even the darkest circumstances into something meaningful. Alina, he said softly, you're remarkable. She looked up from her canvas, paint smudged on her cheek, his hat slightly askew on her head. No, Jake, we're remarkable. This love we've built, this life we've created, remarkable. And looking at her in that moment, surrounded by the golden light of afternoon, Jake knew that whatever happened next, they had already won. October arrived with a crisp coolness that made Alina's studio the perfect place to spend long afternoons. She'd been painting with renewed vigor, as if some internal fire had been rekindled. Her latest piece, a portrait of Jake sitting on the porch, with honey at his feet, was her best work yet. You're getting better, Jake observed, watching her add delicate details to the painting. Your technique, I mean, but also, ... I know, Alina said, setting down her brush. I feel it too. Stronger, more like myself. They'd been cautiously optimistic. Since her last set of tests showed the tumors had stopped growing. Dr. Martinez called it stable disease, not cured. But not dying either. Alina called it borrowed time and was determined to make the most of every moment. The phone rang, interrupting their peaceful afternoon. Jake answered, his voice initially casual, then increasingly excited. Alina, he said, hanging up the phone. With a grin, that was Dr. Martinez. He wants us to come in for new scans. He says there's something he needs to show us. Alina's heart clenched. Good something or bad something? I don't know, but he sounded ... hopeful. The drive to the hospital was familiar now, but this time felt different. Alina found herself actually looking forward to seeing the doctor, instead of dreading it. Jake held her hand as they walked through the corridors, his grandfather's hat secure on her head. Dr. Martinez was waiting in his office with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. Alina, Jake, please sit down. I have some remarkable news. He pulled up her scans on his computer, pointing to areas that had shown tumor growth just months before. These are your latest results. As you can see, the tumors have not only stopped growing, they've shrunk. Significantly. Alina stared at the screen, afraid to believe what she was seeing. Shrunk. By more than 60%. Your blood work is showing normal levels across the board. Alina, I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this. By all medical standards, you're in remission. The words hit Alina like a physical force. Remission. Not cured. The doctor was careful to explain that cancer was a lifelong battle, but free from active disease. Free to live, to love, to plan for more than just the next few months. How is this possible? Jake asked, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Martinez shook his head. I wish I could give you a scientific explanation. There's been no change in your treatment protocol. If anything, we'd expected to see progression, not regression. Sometimes, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes the human body does things that defy our understanding. Sometimes healing happens in ways we can't measure or explain. Alina looked at Jake, then at the doctor. What does this mean for my future? It means you have one, Dr. Martinez said simply. We'll need to monitor you closely, of course. Regular scans, blood work, the usual precautions. But Alina, you can start making long-term plans again. You can start thinking about years, not months. Outside in the parking lot, Alina stood perfectly still, letting the October sun warm her face. Jake wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on the top of her head. Years, she whispered. Jake, we have years. We have forever, he corrected, turning her around to face him. Elena Vasquez, will you marry me? Elena's eyes widened. Are you serious? Dead serious. Jake dropped to one knee right there in the hospital parking lot, pulling a simple diamond ring from his pocket. I've been carrying this around for 2 months, waiting for the right moment. I figure there's no better time than right now, when we've just been given our whole lives back. Alina laughed, the sound bright and clear in the crisp air. Yes, Jake. Morrison, yes, I'll marry you. As Jake slipped a ring onto her finger, Alina felt something shift inside her chest. Not the familiar weight of fear or uncertainty, but something light and buoyant. Hope, joy, the absolute certainty that love really could conquer anything. I love you, she said, framing his face with her hands. I love you, for fighting for me, for believing in miracles, for giving me a reason to get well. I love you too, Jake said, standing and pulling her into his arms. And Alina, yes. You can keep the hat as long as you want, but I think it's done its job. Alina reached up and touched the worn felt, feeling the years of love, in hope it had absorbed. No, she said softly. I think its job is just beginning. Spring returned to the ranch with a vengeance, painting the valley in wildflowers and new possibilities. Alina had been cancer-free for 6 months, and each day felt like a gift unwrapped fresh from God's hands. The wedding was planned for the first Saturday in May, on the very spot where she'd first learned to see beauty in living, instead of just surviving. I can't believe you're making me wear a dress, Jake grumbled, adjusting the collar of his white shirt for the 10th time. His best man, his brother Tom, laughed and straightened Jake's tie. It's your wedding day, not a cattle drive, Tom said. Besides, Elena's worth getting dressed up for. Jake looked toward the house where Alina was getting ready with her small wedding party, Maria from the hospital, her friend Sarah from the art gallery, and Mrs. Henderson from town, who'd become like a grandmother to her. She's worth everything, he said quietly. Alina stood in front of the mirror in Jake's bedroom, smoothing down the simple white dress she'd chosen. It wasn't fancy, just a flowing sundress with lace sleeves that made her feel beautiful and comfortable. But the most important accessory was still Jake's grandfather's hat, carefully cleaned and lovingly placed on her head. You sure about the hat? Sarah asked, adjusting Elena's veil around it. It's not exactly traditional bridal wear. Neither is marrying a man who saved your life by believing in miracles, Alina replied, touching the worn felt tenderly. Besides, this hat is part of our story. It's part of who we are. The ceremony was held in the meadow by the creek, with the old oak tree serving as a natural altar. Folding chairs for 30 guests sat in neat rows, and Elena's paintings or landscapes of the ranch served as decorations. The local minister, Pastor Williams, had known Jake's family for years, and was delighted to perform the ceremony. As the guitar began to play a simple melody, performed by Jake's cousin Alina, appeared at the edge of the meadow. She walked alone, as she'd chosen to do, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked that morning. But she didn't feel alone. She felt surrounded by love, by hope, by the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Jake's breath caught when he saw her. She was beautiful not just in the dress and the flowers, but in the way she moved with confidence and joy. The hat looked perfect on her head, as natural as if it had been made for her. His grandfather would have loved her, Jake thought, would have loved her courage, her strength, her ability to find beauty in the simple things. Dearly beloved, Pastor Williams began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jake Morrison and Elena Vasquez. This couple has shown us what it means to love through adversity, to find hope in the darkest places, and to believe in the power of commitment, even when the future is uncertain. Alina found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From the sterile hospital room where they'd first met, to this meadow full of wildflowers and promise. She thought about the months of treatment, the fear, the uncertainty, and how Jake had never wavered in his belief that love could heal what medicine couldn't touch. "Jake," she said when it came time for their vows, "you saw me when I couldn't see myself. You believed in me when I'd given up believing in everything. You showed me that love isn't just about the good times, it's about showing up when things get hard. You taught me the difference between surviving and living, and I promised to spend the rest of my life living fully, loving deeply, and never taking a single day with you for granted." Jake's eyes were bright with tears as he spoke his vows. "Alina, you came into my life when I thought I knew what happiness looked like. You showed me that happiness isn't about having everything easy. It's about having someone to face the hard things with. You've made me braver, kinder, more hopeful. I promise to love you through sickness and health, through joy and sorrow, through every sunrise and sunset for the rest of our lives." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Jake lifted Elena's veil carefully around the hat and kissed her with such tenderness that half the guests were crying. Elena kissed him back, tasting salt and sunshine and the promise of forever. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Williams announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Jake Morrison." As they walked back down the aisle together, Elena caught sight of Dr. Martinez in the crowd. He was crying unabashedly, and when their eyes met, he nodded once, a gesture that said everything about miracles and hope and the power of love to heal. The reception was held on the porch and in the backyard, with string lights and more wildflowers, and a cake that Mrs. Henderson had made in the shape of a cowboy hat. Elena danced with Jake as the sun set over the valley, her white dress flowing around her legs, his grandfather's hat secure on her head. "Mrs. Morrison," Jake said, spinning her around. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Elena replied, laughing, as he dipped her dramatically. "Though I think I'll always be the girl in the cowboy hat to most people. And I wouldn't have it any other way," Jake said, pulling her close. "That hat brought you back to me. It's part of our miracle." As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Elena found herself standing by the creek, looking up at the stars. The hat sat perfectly on her head, and she could almost feel the generations of love and hope it had witnessed. "Thank you," she whispered to the night sky, to Jake's great-grandfather, to whatever force had brought them together. "Thank you for teaching me that some things are worth fighting for." Jake appeared beside her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Morrison?" "Forever," Elena said, leaning back against his chest. "I'm thinking about forever." 3 years later, Elena stood in the same meadow where she'd married Jake, but this time she wasn't alone. In her arms, she held their 6-month-old daughter, Rose, while 2-year-old Samuel played at her feet, chasing honey through the wildflowers. The sight would have been impossible to imagine during those dark days in the hospital, but here it was, real, beautiful, miraculous. "Mama, look," Samuel called, holding up a handful of dandelions. "Flowers for you." Elena knelt down, adjusting the small cowboy hat on Samuel's head, a child-sized version Jake had commissioned from the same hat maker who'd crafted his great-grandfather's. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. Just like you." The adoption had been Jake's idea. After 2 years of trying to conceive naturally, with doctors warning that Elena's previous cancer treatments might have affected her fertility, they'd decided to open their hearts to children who needed homes. Samuel had come to them at 18 months, a scared little boy who'd been through 3 foster homes. Rose had arrived just 6 months later, a newborn whose teenage mother had chosen Elena and Jake from dozens of profiles. "I think Samuel's got your artistic eye," Jake said, appearing with a picnic basket. "He's been arranging those flowers for 10 minutes. Elena smiled, watching their son's serious concentration as he sorted dandelions by size. "And Rose has your stubborn streak. She refused to nap this morning." "Both good qualities," Jake said, settling beside them on the blanket. "Means they'll be fighters, like their mama." Elena adjusted Jake's original hat, still her constant companion, and settled Rose in her lap. The baby immediately reached for the hat's brim, her tiny fingers grasping the worn felt. It had become a family tradition of sorts. Each child's first photo included the hat. And Samuel had learned to be gentle with Mama's special hat from the moment he could crawl. "Tell me the story, Mama," Samuel said, abandoning his flowers, to climb into Elena's lap, next to his baby sister. "About the hat." Elena exchanged a look with Jake. They'd told this story 100 times, but it never got old. "Well," she began, "once upon a time, there was a very sick lady who thought she was going to die, but then the cowboy came." Samuel interrupted, having heard the story enough times to know all the beats. That's right. The cowboy came, and he put his magic hat on her head, and he smiled the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. And do you know what happened next? She got better. Samuel clapped his hands. Because of love. Because of love, Alina confirmed, kissing the top of his head. And because sometimes, when you have someone who believes in you, you can do impossible things. Jake reached over and touched the hat gently. You know what the best part of the story is? What, Daddy? The hat didn't just save Mama. It brought us our whole family. Because if Mama hadn't gotten better, we never would have met you and Rose. We never would have become a family. Samuel considered this seriously. So the hat is magic for all of us. The hat is love, Alina said simply. And love is the most powerful magic there is. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Alina found herself in her studio. The room had evolved over the years, still her sanctuary, but now filled with children's artwork, family photos, and the controlled chaos of a house full of love. Her easel held her latest painting, a portrait of their family in the meadow, with Jake's hat prominently featured. Another masterpiece, Jake said, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. I hope so. The gallery wants to do a showing of my family series next month. Alina accepted the tea gratefully. Can you believe it? They're calling me an inspirational artist now. Well, you are inspiring, Jake said, settling into the chair that had become his permanent spot in her studio. You've inspired me, our kids, everyone who hears your story. Alina touched the hat on her head, feeling its familiar weight. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't followed that ambulance. If you hadn't decided to come into my hospital room. But I did, Jake said firmly. And you know why? Because some things are meant to be. Some people are meant to find each other, even in the darkest places. Do you think the hat really saved me? Alina asked. Or do you think it was just medicine and time and luck? Jake was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Does it matter? The hat brought us together. It gave you something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. It became a symbol of hope, of love, of the belief that miracles can happen. Whether it's magic or medicine, or just the power of 2 people refusing to give up on each other, the result is the same. Alina nodded, understanding flooding through her. We're living proof that love can heal what medicine can't touch. And that second chances are worth fighting for, Jake added. And that sometimes the most broken things can become the most beautiful. As if summoned by their conversation, Samuel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Mama, I had a bad dream. Alina immediately set down her tea and held out her arms. Come here, sweetheart. Samuel climbed into her lap, and she adjusted the hat so he could see himself, reflected in the studio's mirror. You know what I do when I have bad dreams. What? I remember that I'm protected by the magic hat, and by Daddy's love, and by all the good things in our life. And I remember that, even when scary things happen, we face them together. Samuel touched the hat gently. Will you tell me the story again? Tomorrow, Alina promised, but for now, how about we go tuck you back into bed? As they walked back to the house together, Jake carrying Samuel, Alina, still wearing the hat, Lena felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Not perfect, not without challenges, but full of love, purpose, and the kind of happiness that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to thrive. 20-5 years later, Alina stood in the same meadow where she'd married Jake, where she'd told her children countless stories, where she'd painted some of her most cherished works. Now, she was surrounded by a crowd much larger than their simple wedding children, grandchildren, friends, neighbors, and admirers who'd come to celebrate the dedication of the Alina Morrison Art Center. The hat still sat on her head, more weathered now, but still secure. Her hair was silver beneath it, and her face bore the lines of a life fully lived. But her eyes held the same fierce joy that had first captivated Jake all those years ago. Grandma Alina called 8-year-old Rosemarie, Samuel's daughter, as she ran through the crowd. They're about to start. Alina smiled, watching her granddaughter's enthusiasm. Rosemarie had inherited the family's artistic genes, and was already showing promise as a painter. More importantly, she'd inherited their capacity for hope, and their belief in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. Where's your grandfather? Alina asked, adjusting the child's small hat, the 4th generation, to wear a Morrison family hat. He's talking to the man from the newspaper, Rosemarie said, pointing to where Jake stood near the art center's entrance. At 77, he was still tall and strong, though his hair had gone white and his hands showed the years of ranch work. He caught Elena's eye across the crowd and winked. The same gesture that had made her heart skip 25 years ago. The art center had been Elena's dream for years, a place where local artists could display their work, where children could learn to paint, where the community could gather to celebrate creativity and hope. Jake had made it happen, just as he'd made so many of her dreams come true. Friends, family, and neighbors called Mayor Thompson, stepping up to the microphone. We're here today to celebrate not just the opening of this beautiful art center, but the remarkable woman who inspired it. Elena Morrison's story is one of hope, healing, and the transformative power of love. Elena felt Jake's hand slip into hers as the mayor continued. Many of you know Elena's story, how she came to our community battling cancer, how she found love and healing here, how she's spent the last 25 years creating art that captures the beauty of our valley and the strength of the human spirit. The crowd applauded, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about the scared, sick woman who'd first worn this hat, who'd believed she was dying. That woman never could have imagined this moment, surrounded by love, celebrating a life of purpose and joy. Elena, the mayor said, would you like to say a few words? Elena stepped forward, her hand instinctively reaching for the hat. Thank you all for being here today. This art center represents everything I've learned about the power of community, creativity, and hope. But before I say anything else, I want to tell you about a hat. She touched the worn felt gently. This hat belonged to Jake's great-grandfather. It's seen for generations of love, hardship, joy, and triumph. When I was dying in a hospital bed 25 years ago, Jake put this hat on my head and told me to fight. He said it had never sat on the head of a quitter. The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. I want every child who comes through these doors to know that they're not quitters either. I want them to know that art isn't just about creating beautiful things, it's about expressing hope, about believing in possibilities, about refusing to give up even when things seem impossible. Elena paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. She saw Dr. Martinez, now retired, but still glowing with pride. She saw Maria, the nurse who'd witnessed her first miracle. She saw their children and grandchildren, all wearing their own versions of the family hat. This hat taught me that love is the most powerful force in the universe. It can heal what medicine can't touch, create beauty from ashes, and give us the courage to face whatever comes next. I hope this art center will be a place where people discover their own version of that magic. The applause was thunderous, and Elena felt Jake's arm around her waist, steady and strong. As the crowd began to move toward the art center for the official opening, Elena noticed a young woman standing at the edge of the group. She was thin, wearing a headscarf, and had the unmistakable look of someone fighting their own battle with illness. Elena approached her slowly. Are you interested in art? The woman nodded. I heard about your story. I'm going through treatment right now. Cancer, the doctors say. She trailed off, unable to finish. Elena reached up and gently removed the hat from her head. What's your name? Sarah Chen. Sarah, I want you to have this. Elena placed the hat on Sarah's head, adjusting it just as Jake had done for her so many years ago. This hat has been in my family for almost a century. It's seen love triumph over fear, hope overcome despair, and miracles happen when people refuse to give up. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I can't take your hat. You're not taking it, Elena said firmly. You're continuing its story. You're adding your chapter to its legacy. She smiled, the expression lighting up her face. And Sarah, you're going to be just fine. I can feel it. As Elena walked back to Jake, she felt lighter somehow. The hat had served its purpose in her life, had been her talisman and her strength. Now it was time for it to work its magic for someone else. You sure about that? Jake asked. Having witnessed the exchange, Elena looked back at Sarah, who was standing straighter now, her hand touching the hat with wonder. I'm sure. The hat doesn't belong to any one person, Jake. It belongs to everyone who needs to believe in miracles. Jake pulled her close, kissing her forehead. I love you, Elena Morrison. More today than the day I married you. And I love you, Jake Morrison. Thank you for teaching me that some stories don't have endings, they just have new beginnings. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Elena watched Sarah walk toward the art center, the hat secure on her head. In that moment, Elena understood that her greatest masterpiece wasn't any painting she'd created, was the legacy of hope she was leaving behind. The belief that love could conquer anything, and the knowledge that sometimes the most broken things could become the most beautiful. The hat would continue its journey, finding new heads to grace and new hearts to heal. And somewhere in the future, Another scared, sick person would discover that they were stronger than they knew, braver than they believed, and more loved than they'd ever imagined. Because some stories, Elena thought with a smile, are too powerful to ever truly end. They said she'd never survive until the cowboy put his hat on her head and smiled. But survival, Elena learned, was just the beginning. Living, loving, and leaving a legacy of hope, that was the real miracle. I regret that it took a crisis for me to learn how to ask for help. I regret all the years I spent thinking I had to do everything alone. Ethan pulled her close, careful not to wrinkle her dress. Maybe we only learn those lessons when we're ready for them. Maybe the crisis was what made you ready. Maya looked through the windows at the reception, at her mother dancing with Dr. Peterson, at the nurses who'd become family, at the colleagues who'd celebrated her writing successes. She thought about the book she'd just finished, a memoir about finding love in the place where hope almost died, and the publisher who'd offered her a contract based on the proposal. I used to think asking for help was the beginning of dependence, she said. Now I know it's the beginning of community. What do you think you'll ask for next? Ethan asked. Maya considered the question, thinking about the life they were building together, the research they both wanted to pursue, the writing she wanted to continue, the family they might create someday, the ways they could help other people find their own strength. I think I'll ask for the courage to help others the way we were helped, she said finally. I think I'll ask for the wisdom to know when to fight and when to surrender, when to be strong and when to be vulnerable. And I'll help you figure out the answers, Ethan said, echoing the words he'd spoken to her that first day in the hospital corridor. I already am, Maya replied, understanding finally that help wasn't something you received once and then stopped needing. It was something you gave and received continuously, a flow of support and love that connected all the people who were brave enough to ask for it and generous enough to offer it. As they walked back into the reception, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the window, not the desperate woman who'd once whispered for help in hospital corridors, but a woman who'd learned that asking for help was the beginning of everything good in her life. A woman who'd discovered that love wasn't about being rescued, but about choosing to rescue each other. Every day, in small ways and large ones. The last thing she whispered wasn't a prayer or a plea or a commitment. It was a simple statement of fact. I am loved, and I love in return, and that is enough. The echo of her words mixed with the sound of laughter and music from the reception, creating a harmony that spoke of hope fulfilled, dreams realized, and the kind of ending that was really just the beginning of everything beautiful yet to come. In the years that followed, Maya's memoir, Help Me, a love story, became a bestseller, offering hope to families facing similar crises. Elena remained in remission, eventually becoming a volunteer patient advocate at Mercy General. Ethan's research protocol was approved for widespread use, saving countless lives. And Maya learned that the most powerful love stories aren't about being rescued, they're about finding the courage to ask for help and the wisdom to offer it in return.